Hi there everybody. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at parallel arrays and how to use parallel arrays when we're manipulating data. Buckle up for this one. This is going to be a big one. So we're writing larger and larger programs here, and this program is no exception. This is going to be a big one, but we want to stay organized. We want to understand how all of this goes together. One of the really great things about this program is it's trying to be very good at the data validation. So when a user makes a selection, it's trying to make sure that the program doesn't crash. So a lot of the code in this program does data manipulation and reads in information from the user, but a lot of it also is there for data validation to make sure that the input that the user has entered is actually valid and won't cause the program to crash. And that's very important as you write bigger and bigger pieces of software. So I'm going to run this program first. We get to take a look at what it does, and then we'll take a look through all the different lines. So first of all, it prompts you for the number of teams. I'm going to have 4 teams here. Enter the team name for team number 1. We'll call them the Ducks. And enter the number of wins for the Ducks. They won 8 games and they lost 2. Enter the team name for team number 2. Let's call these guys the Swans. They finished 5-5. 5 wins, 5 losses. We have the Geese. All right, they had a tough season. They had 3 wins and 7 losses. Okay, we've got the Ducks, the Swans, the Geese. We need some other bird. Let's call these guys the Storks. And they had a great season. They finished 9-1. So I'm then prompted with a menu. Select an option. I can output my original data, output winning percentages, or exit. So I'm going to output the original data. So it has a nice user-friendly sentences there. The Ducks have 8 wins and 2 losses. Swans have 5 wins, 5 losses, etc., etc. I can output winning percentages. So it provides me with the winning percentage, 1 decimal place for each of those with the percentage sign and everything, so it's formatted very nicely. I can exit, but I'm going to try to do something else. I'm going to put the value 7, which is of course not valid, and I just want to show how that just loops and it doesn't crash. I can also put in a letter, for example, a few letters, DF, GTF, and when I hit enter, sorry, that was not valid. So it's actually not crashing. Instead, it's actually picking up those are characters, and it's outputting a message to me saying that that's not valid, which is very, very cool. I can then select 3, and my program will exit. Thank you for using the program. So how is this implemented? Let's take a look at some of the code. And again, you're going to want to pause this. You're going to maybe want to take some notes, maybe rewind some components as well. So we have user input, of course. We have the number of entries set to 0, choices set to 0, and we have a Boolean value called invalid, which is true. We jump into our first loop. As long as as long as that input is invalid, which it will be in the first case, then we prompt the user for the number of teams, and we store that. We're then going to take that value, so we read in the number of teams as actually a string, and we store it in user input, and then we try to parse it, right? And we use the try and the catch, so that if it parses successfully, so if it turns into an integer successfully, then invalid can be set to false because it's actually valid. So it's sort of a double negative there, but that's to make our while loop work effectively. If it was not parsed effectively, so if it was not successful in turning the string value into an integer, so it wasn't entered as an integer, for example, like I did when I typed in DF and a few other characters, in that case, it won't crash. So there's a catch statement there that says, sorry, that was not valid input, and then, of course, invalid will still be true. So it will come back to this while loop again, and it will repeat the prompting of the number of teams. So that's how we've caught that for the first data entry. We then set up our parallel arrays. So we have team name, wins, losses, and winning percentage. And then we have our loop for number of entries. So the user had typed in how many entries they wanted to put, how many teams were going to be entered. And so that's used both as the size of the array and also to count for the loop. So we prompt the user for the team name, we retrieve that information, and then we get into a while loop again for the number of wins and the number of losses. And notice we do the same thing. Use a try and a catch. If the input was successful, so if it's actually an integer that the user entered, then that will be parsed successfully, and so invalid is set to false. But if it's not, then we'll output the message, sorry, that was not valid input. That's for wins, and then we repeat the process, so another while loop. For losses, and we repeat that same process where we grab the input as a string, we parse it to an integer. If that's successful, we know that it's a proper integer, So then we can set invalid to false and leave that while loop. So now we've got our wins and we've got our losses. We run through a loop to determine winning percentage and to set that to the correct number of decimal places. So we've seen that algorithm a few times in our course. And then we prompt them with the user menu. So we prompt them with a user menu that has 3 options. We grab that option as a string. We parse it into an integer to make sure that they've put something in that's an integer, either 1, 2, or 3. And of course, if it's not, then we would output, sorry, that was not valid input. We have a switch statement here that handles each of the cases. So in the case that choice is 1, then we would output the original information in the nice sentence. In the case that the option was number 2, we will output the winning percentages, and then option number 3, of course, will generate a nice friendly message, and then the program will finish. So there is a lot to this program. I'm hoping that you're going to watch this video a few times. You'll maybe pause it, you'll maybe take some notes. But that's the value of these try and catch statements in validating data, which is very important as we write these larger and larger programs.